So in 2008, I took my medical specialist class in Memphis at the Memphis Fire Training Academy, which was quite interesting because during the class, a tornado came through and ripped through the city of Memphis. They almost
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was actually really, so they come into the classroom, they evacuated us into an interior classroom. We stayed there for a little bit, and then they had said that they may need us to augment the FEMA teams.
Thoughts and opinions by Job Talks podcast members and guests are not representative of any department, organization, or city. This episode is brought to you by Fortified Leather. Fortified Leather is owned by Nathan Welch, a firefighter out in Selma, California. I've had the opportunity over the last few weeks to get to know Nathan and learn a lot about his business, and I couldn't be happier to have him as a sponsor of the show. Fortified Leather comes from humble family beginnings when Nathan found some leather working tools left over from an old relative. He was in need of a shield at the time and decided to try his hand at leatherwork, and we're certainly glad he did. Since then, Fortified Leather has grown from making that first shield to a solid business shipping quality leather-made goods all over the country. Fortified Leather makes leather suspenders, bunker belts, custom radio harnesses, glove holsters, flashlight holders, and a whole lot more. They're high quality and able to be customized, so if you're in the market, head over to fortifiedleather.com and check out our friend Nathan. Make sure to tell him that Job Talk sent you over. Don't forget to find him on all the social media channels, give him a follow and a shout out, and let's keep supporting our firefighter and family-owned businesses. Hey guys, thanks for taking a second before the episode to listen to our sponsors. Just wanted to let you guys know that we decided to create a Patreon account as well. Unfortunately, producing this podcast isn't free as much as we love doing it. Between the equipment, the software, and all the editing stuff, it costs money. We want to be around for the long haul, and we want to be able to provide you with good quality episodes and eventually hands-on training. To do that, unfortunately, we need to bring money in. So we have our Patreon account. You can go to patreon.com/jobtalks. That's patreon.com/JOBTLKS. We have 2-tier subscriptions. The first tier is $1 a month. Basically just letting us know that you support what we're doing, and we really appreciate that. In exchange, we're going to give you 10% off any classes or lectures that we do in the future. We have another tier for $2.50 a month. And in that tier, we're going to actually invite you to be an audience as we record live episodes. So when we schedule an episode with a guest, you will get a link to your email to view that episode live as a guest. And then from that subscription, we're going to pick once or twice a season somebody to actually come on and be part of the episode with us. Right now, that's what we can offer, and we hope you guys like it. We hope you'll support us. So again, patreon.com/jobtalks, and we appreciate you. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jobs. We are here today with Chief Chris Coleman with the North Attleboro Fire Department. Morning, Chief. How's it going?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and chat with us today. I know Johnny knows you from kind of proximity, but myself and Barry met you a couple months ago when we did the medical specialist course up in Beverly, which was honestly hands down the best class I've done since I joined the fire service. Like absolute blast. So I appreciate you being willing to come on and talk to us today a little bit about yourself and about the task forces. Before we get going, I just want to give everybody a quick bio for you. It's not a quick bio. You have a lot on here. You've done a lot. So you're the chief of North Attleboro. You're a medical specialist with FEMA, Urban Search and Rescue Task Force 1. You're a member steering committee chief of the Bristol County Tech Rescue Team. You've been on North Attleboro for 26 years, 23 years as a medic. Came up through the ranks there. We were just talking a little bit before we started recording about coming up through the ranks there. And you've been the chief for the last 4.5 years. Again, member of the FEMA US&R team, Task Force 1, 17 years as a medical specialist. And you've had multiple deployments. You went to Springfield, Sandy, Hurricane Harvey in Houston, and a bunch of other storm deployments, which seem to be like the kind of overarching deployments nowadays.
Yeah, a lot of the deployments that we have is all weather related, right? I mean, the weather is definitely changing. Look at Hawaii right now with wildfires. A lot of the stuff we went to was a lot of flooding, a lot of secondary searches we were doing, and assisting those agencies with the need, what they want, and what they need help with. And the biggest thing you're going to hear me say throughout the next 45 minutes to an hour is that the FEMA team is there to help you, right? We're not there to take over. We're not there to be the primary agency. We're there to help the local municipalities respond and recover from the disaster they had.
Yeah, and I think that's good. So we obviously want to get a little background on you, and then I think the kind of theme of the show is the FEMA teams and talking about that. How did you get into the fire service to start off with? Was it like something you always wanted to do? I love asking people that question. Are you like a second, third, fourth gen? Are you the first generation in your family?
So I'm actually third generation. So my father was a firefighter and then a fire chief. Ironically, my dad was the fire chief of North Attleboro.
Oh, nice.
So I'm following in his footsteps. So I grew up in Cumberland, Rhode Island. All my life, my father was the firefighter and then a fire chief in Cumberland. So Cumberland had 5 fire districts back then. He was the chief of the North Cumberland Fire Department, which is at the North Attleboro town line. He was a firefighter there, fire chief there, and in 1988, he got the job as fire chief in the town of North Attleboro. So we moved from Cumberland. I was in the 6th grade at that time, so I finished 6th grade in Cumberland and then moved to North Attleboro, where I, 7th grade and on. When I graduated high school, I went right into Community College of Rhode Island, got my associate's degree in fire science, got my EMT basic. I was a call firefighter in North Cumberland, Rhode Island Fire Department for a short time before I got hired in North Attleboro. Very lucky. I took a bunch of tests. Obviously, interviewing for a department where your father's the fire chief is a completely different aspect. I will tell you right now, I took a bunch of tests to try and avoid that. And then I took the civil service test. I scored very well. I was an EMT. I was a resident of the town. I topped the list. And back then there was fire commissioners. So my father had nothing to do with the hiring. The fire commissioners, a third independent party, interviewed me and hired me. Was a firefighter EMT. Got assigned to a shift, went to the academy just like everybody else did in 1997. And then, believe it or not, I had no ambitions of becoming a paramedic back then. I wanted to be a firefighter, like we all want to do. See those fires. And so then, working, so in North Attleboro, you're assigned to the ambulance, obviously, like every department around us, right? That has an ambulance service. So I was on the ambulance. And then I kind of got tired of driving, right? That's all I was doing was driving the ambulance, working with the paramedic. So 3 years in, I went to paramedic school. And the best decision I ever made, to be quite honest with you, is look where I am now. 22 years as a medic, a US&R paramedic now, which I never saw that coming in the years prior to. But got my paramedic. I was very nervous being a young paramedic with little experience, but I worked with some really great paramedic mentors. North Attleboro is a busy, mid-sized town. We're 19 square miles. We run 3 fire stations. We have 2 engines, a Quint, 2 ambulances, and a shift commander, which has grown over the years. And the 28 junior firefighters are assigned to the ambulance. And once you're out of that 28 junior firefighters, you have the contractual right to put your letter in to come off the ambulance, not be required to work the ambulance anymore. So that's kind of the promotional stepping stone we have in our department. I did 12 years on the ambulance, and not every day you're on the ambulance. You rotated back and forth, just like Stoughton does and other departments, right?
Right.
So I worked on the ambulance for 12 years and then got made lieutenant. Was a lieutenant on a company for several years. I think in the rate almost nine years as a lieutenant. And then took the promotional exam. Got promoted to captain. I was assigned to fire prevention, which I didn't really want to go into fire prevention. I missing the trucks, missing going on the calls. I'm one of those guys that want to go to all the calls. Right? That keeps you sharp. That keeps you in the game, because obviously this job can seriously hurt you if you don't stay up on stuff. So I went to fire prevention, which was good, great learning experience. I was there for a year. And then the chief spot came open. And I applied for that, went through that process, and was successful. And I was a very young fire chief. I'm still a young fire chief. I was only 42 when I took the job. But I love it. It's great. So kind of go back a little bit. That's my fire service background. Going back to 17 years ago, I was into the tech rescue stuff a little bit. I took some classes through the Mass Fire Academy, the confined space, trench, high angle stuff. And then I started seeing information about, the US&R teams throughout the country, the local tech rescue teams at that point in time. And I found that, Massachusetts Task Force 1 is one of 28 FEMA task forces throughout the country, and it's in Beverly. This looks very interesting. Kind of looked at some stuff and looked at the requirements, and it was very overwhelming at first. Didn't really know too much about it. And I applied. I sent my application in, had an interview, and then I was appointed on the team. So that is the best thing I ever did in my career. There is over 250 people on the team from every department from Connecticut to Vermont. So we're very unique because we're a regional team. If you compare us to New York City, New York Task Force 1, they're a city team. So to be on the New York City Task Force, you have to be either a firefighter, police officer, or part of EMS. And that is it. You can't be a civilian. Where in the FEMA team, for us, there are civilians.
Right.
Wide range knowledge. We've got structural engineers, rescue technicians, paramedics,
Nice.
Planning, informational technology, communications. The caliber of people on this team is outstanding, and I can't say I can say so much about them. It's a wonderful experience. Definitely, as a young paramedic, it was intimidating.
Yeah.
There was no doubt.
Yeah.
I'm not from a big city department. And there is a lot of guys on that team with a lot of experience from big departments that see a lot. But you know what? We all work together. We train every month. And it's spectacular. It really is.
I think. I was just gonna say, I think that's one of the things. Like when I went through the med spec course with you, or that you were part of the instructor cadre for, was the unbelievable wealth of knowledge. Like it was, and we had guys up from New York Task Force. Actually, we had, speaking of deployments, we had Dr. Dario, who was the medical director for all of FDNY, who was there. He was supposed to be on this morning, and he got deployed to Hawaii for the fire. So you guys are out there doing it, but the knowledge was unbelievable. And then within the instructors, and then even within, we did a lot with. It was just Cambridge and Boston EMS in that class, and it was a really nice balance because we're medics, but they're medics. You know what I mean? Like that's what they do 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And so it was a good balance where they like brought in a lot of knowledge for the clinical aspect, and then we were able to like add a little bit to that knowledge with the fire, like ropes and knots and hauling and moving and things like that. So I think having all those like different disciplines obviously play well off of each other. But I also want to back up for 1 second because I think it's a pretty refreshing thing to hear. You don't often hear somebody say going to medic school was something great they did in the fire service. Just real quick, can you expand on that a little bit? Like, so do you feel like it opened doors for you? Do you feel like you just liked the work? You like helping people? Like, what about it makes you think that it was such a great decision? Like I said, it's a refreshing point of view because we don't hear it a lot in the fire service today.
Yeah, you don't. So I think it definitely opened doors for me. There's no doubt. I would not be sitting here talking to you today as a medical specialist for the FEMA team if I did not go to paramedic school. I became a much stronger provider being a paramedic. When I was a firefighter, lieutenant, and a captain on the line, I also worked part-time in an emergency room in Brockton at the Good Samaritan. And that also provided the extra knowledge to be a good provider. I looked at being a paramedic and working on the ambulance in the fire service as kind of the best of both worlds, right? So, yes, you do your EMS calls, which is 80% of what we do. But in our system, and very similar to Stoughton, when we have a fire, the paramedics on the ambulances park that ambulance, they put their stuff on, and they go to work, right? We augment that engine or that ladder truck crew. It's not like a third service EMS system where they're just doing EMS standby, right? Now, if we do pull up to a fire and there's a victim on the front lawn, well, that's a different story, right? That our first job is life safety, and we have to go to work with that. But I look at it as the best of both worlds. Back in 2015, 2016, North Attleboro was going through some tough financial times, like a lot of departments were. And we started a model of cross-staffing, which we don't do anymore. We were cross-staffing a east side station with an engine and an ambulance with 2 firefighters. So whatever came in first, you took the truck for that specific call. But I had the opportunity to be the senior firefighter over there on my shift, and kind of get that experience before I became a lieutenant of running a company, working with a partner, and doing both, doing EMS and doing fire. So medic school definitely opened up a lot of doors for me. And I would not be on the FEMA team today as a paramedic if I was not a paramedic.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Like, I think, there are a lot of people obviously that like I said, don't feel the same way. And I think it's good to have somebody in a leadership position who loves being a fireman and loves being a paramedic, because then you make decisions that are good for both sides of it versus, one or the other. So I think that's pretty awesome. My old job used to cross staff, so we would run. Jesus, what did we run?
It's good. It's good that you
I know.
I'm in the pain right now across staffing. I'm trying to get away.
We ran three firefighters and a shift commander out of our headquarters station, and we took whatever was appropriate for the first call. So ambulance or ladder or engine. And then if you took the ambulance, there was one, we called it the swing guy, that would stay back. And so then if the next call came in, they'd be taking a truck. If it was a fire, they'd be taking a truck, by themselves with the shift commander to a fire. So it's definitely a wild model to use,
We're still in it now, and I got to tell you, so our staffing is definitely growing. Right now, we have an 11-man minimum, but we've got, I think, by the time this hiring's done, we're all going to have 14 on our group, and that's going to get us away from cross staffing at least for a little while, and only as we have full shifts of work with people all showing up. Our chief's goal is to get to 13 and then to 15, and an ultimate goal of like 17 guys. And a lot of that, I would say, comes from the years and the histories of unassigned seats and the cross staffing that we have to do now just to make things work. But you know how it is all of a sudden, and it's happened. I've been part of it where even a guy forgets his radio, maybe forgets his bunker pants. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's insane. Like you see this stuff.
You gotta move all your stuff from one truck to the other.
Stuff. And sometimes you're responding back to the station to get a truck to get to the next call. I mean, it's like, it just doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, because we adapt. That's what we do in the fire service, right? We adapt and we make things happen, and that's what we're known for. But mistakes are going to happen. And so it'll be nice to get away from that.
100%. And we did cross staffing for about 5-6 years because we adapted, we overcame, right? That's what the fire service does. But our call volume here in North Attleboro, we're very similar to Stoughton, right? We're very similar to you guys.
You guys are busy.
I tell you, our call volume jumped up 36% in 5 years here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Our EMS run volume is up over 20%, and our acuity is up 5%.
Wow.
So there was many times where under the cross-staffing model, North Attleboro had one engine and one ladder truck and a shift commander, and that was it in town. Because both ambulances were at the hospital.
Right.
Now, after July 1, we're not cross-staffing. Now I have 2 engines, a ladder truck, a shift commander available for fire duty when the ambulance are at the hospital.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And again, kudos to you for having that vision and moving towards that. Like Johnny said, we have to adapt to the times and budgets and things like that. And it's important to have the visions that when you have the right town management and budget and whatever, that you can get the things that you need for the guys. And hopefully it stays that way, right? Hopefully we don't hit another era where they have to make cutbacks or something like that.
No kidding.
Exactly. Yep.
So you've been, let's get back into the FEMA stuff. So you've been part of the team for 17 years and you joined as a medical specialist and you've stayed in that role.
I did. I stayed in that role. But I also did additional training too. So in the FEMA system, especially for our team, the more disciplines that you're cross-trained in will kind of give you the opportunity to be deployed more frequently, right? So we've got about 20 paramedics, and it all depends on your green status. And I'll refer to that as being the availability and providing you meet all your requirements. So, when we first came in, there was a recruit period. We had to go through some recruit training. It was spanned out over a few months because it was all obviously on weekends or nights. And then once you get out of the recruit period, then you get assigned to your discipline. And then there's discipline-specific training. So, like, for example, for the medical specialist, like the course you just took back in June, that was required for all FEMA paramedics to have before they could be deployable. So in 2008, I took my medical specialist class in Memphis at the Memphis Fire Training Academy, which was quite interesting because during the class, a tornado came through and ripped through the city of Memphis. They almost.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was actually really. So they had come into the classroom. They evacuated us into an interior classroom. We stayed there for a little bit, and then they had said that they may need us to augment the FEMA team. So long story short, it did not happen. But the members from Tennessee Task Force 1 that were in the class came back the next day and explained to us what they did and how they operated. They That's actually awesome. Operated in a collapse factory with some people that were trapped under a sprinkler pipe along with the rest of the roofing. It was a long duration extrication. They treated for crush. They transported with the Memphis fire paramedics to the hospital and saw the patient through. So that was really eye-opening because we got to see what we're learning kind of in real time without not being there. So then that was in 2008. And then shortly after that, I got back, and about 6 months later, I got asked to be an adjunct instructor for the program from one of the instructors from my program. So,
Listen, obviously stood out in class a little bit, huh?
Apparently, I was kind of taken back. All the instructors were from these big city departments: Miami, New York City. Dr. Gonzalez was one of my first instructors. Learned a whole bunch from him. They asked me to come down and teach, and I basically was put on a plane and was sent down to Charlotte to their fire academy for my first class. I didn't know anybody. I walked in the door and I'm like, wow, this is like really overwhelming. And then, that was probably back 2008. And now here I am, 2023, still teaching. Learned a lot. I learned stuff every single day. And every time I teach, I learn more. I'm actually going down to Maryland next week, 2 weeks, to teach at the Naval Warfare Center, doing the same program.
Nice.
That's cool. Can you describe what medical specialist is for people that don't know, like what that program is and what you actually do?
Yeah, sure. It's an advanced paramedic class. That's the best way I can put it, or advanced paramedic practicing modalities. So we deal heavily with crush, but we also, in the FEMA system, we have three primary responsibilities. First priority is our team members. The second priority is the canines. And then the third priority is anybody else that we may come across in our searches, right? So when we get deployed, we'll usually get a notification that there's some sort of event going on, whether it be weather related, whether it could be potentially a terrorist attack or a building collapse like they had in Florida at the Champlain Towers. So we get notified that this is going on. And then there's a whole process we get activated. Local authorities have to make a request, has to go from the local to the state and then over to the federal government. Usually they activate the IST, so the incident support team first. So very similar to what Dr. Dario right now is being deployed into Hawaii for those wildfires. The IST gets there first, and they're the liaison, I would refer them to as to the local agencies. And then at that point in time, they start developing a plan. They figure out how many task force they need. And then you may get assigned to this run card. If you want to relate to a fire service, you get assigned to a run card. So once you get activated, there's a certain time frame you have to be on the road. It's between 4 and 6 hours, depending on what kind of notification you were given. And then as a medical side of things, so we're required to make sure all of our equipment's packed. We've got first in bags, defibrillators, we have vents, medicines. We have to order our pharmacy to be delivered to us. But then we do medical check-in, right? So a type 1 deployment is 80 personnel. A type 3 is 35 to 40 personnel. And then we've also got some smaller MRPs, which are mission-ready packages. The most frequently used mission-ready package is the water MRP, which is I went on to Hurricane Harvey. That's only 16 people.
Okay.
So as a paramedic, your job is to start that medical check-in and making sure that everybody is healthy to go, right? And that's from a full physical to blood pressure checks, making sure they've got their medications that they have to have with them for daily medication dosages that they have to take, and making sure that they're good, because we're going a far distance, right? We could be going, for example, to Texas, and we drove 40 hours to Texas. And if somebody becomes sick, or if somebody's sick before they get in that vehicle, now they can spread whatever they have to the rest of the team, and now that whole team is down. This is a big thing during COVID.
Sure.
We had to make sure that COVID testing was done because you didn't want to get halfway down to, say, Texas, and then all of a sudden turn around to come back.
Right.
So we make sure that everyone's healthy to go. And then we get into the role of making sure all of our equipment's ready to go, and we get assigned vehicles. And then our job is to monitor our people on the way down there. But then our job now kind of transitions into an operational role, right? So we start working with our medical managers, who are the doctors. So under a type 1 task force deployment, it's 4 paramedics and 2 docs, who are the medical managers. And then you've got, under a type 3, you've got 1 doc and 2 medics. And under an MRP, usually water, there's 1 medic with no doc. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But on the type 1 and the type 3, now you have to start working with the medical director, the medical manager, and you have to start getting intel on where you're going, right? So this is where it's very important when you go through the medical specialist program, as you work with people you're going to be seeing. For example, one of the latest storms we had, New York City was coming up to our area. And remember Marco and Joe Spinelli from New York that came and taught? Yep. They called me and said, "Hey, we're coming up to your area. Can you tell us what hospitals are affected by the disaster, the flooding?" Right. So I had my 206 already built for the fire department because we were waiting for the tropical storm to hit. So I just forwarded that 206 down to Marco, which was already done for him. So, and vice versa. If I'm going down to Florida, or when I went to Superstorm Sandy, I called New York City and my connections, and I had the intel within 5 minutes. Right now, I can build my 206. Right, and then I've got that 206. And for people who don't know what 206 is, when you get into the ICS forms, is the 200 through 250 or whatever the number is, but each is a different form, right? And you build your operational action plan off of that data. So it identifies medical aid stations, where they are on site. Where are your primary hospitals? Are they community? Are they level 1? Do they have a cath lab? Do they have a helicopter pad? Who the 911 service is? So that way, if something does go wrong, then you can facilitate treatment.
And it's hugely important, especially when you're going to disaster areas, because the local hospitals might be completely shut down. The local EMS might be completely shut down. So you're flying people elsewhere, or having to drive people extended periods of time, or stay and treat because you can't get them out, or whatever the case is. So it's
exactly. And then working with the DMAT team.
Right.
I'll give you an example in New York City when we were there for our Hurricane Sandy. So we get deployed to Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy was Superstorm Sandy. I don't think it was actually called the hurricane. We were sent down to Connecticut first, and then Connecticut. It didn't hit Connecticut as bad, and then we moved on to New York City, and we were in Howard Beach in Queens, and then over to Rockaway. So we were doing secondary searches. I was on the night shift, which I think most of my deployments have been night shifts. Working like midnight. It was 8 o'clock to about 8 o'clock in the morning. But we were taking care of our job, doing our searches, and we had a member that got sick. And now I transitioned into that mode, and I treated that member, but I followed that member right through. Right, I went to the hospital with that member, did his follow-up care at the end, and then you're there for a liaison to make sure that everything is being done correctly for documentation and making sure that the care they're getting is nothing but the best.
Right.
So it's kind of a multifaceted responsibility, right?
You got to be able to switch roles. So when you say that you're in doing searches, I know a lot of the med spec class was focused on like collapse and confined space, because that's generally the type of environment you're working in, right? Building collapses, things like that.
Correct. Yeah. So that, but it's also kind of changed recently too, where we're doing wide area searches, right? Because if you think now, a lot of the disasters that have been happening are flood related. So the flood waters are up high, then they recede, and now you've got buildings that you have to search because there could be people that are still in there. Our orders in New York City and Howard Beach were we had to do secondary searches on 2-story homes because the water was up to the first floor. So we went house to house doing secondary searches, working with New York City Fire Department collaboratively in doing those searches. And then in Texas, in Houston, by the time we get down there, a lot of the water had receded, but there was still secondary searches that were needed because the primaries were done, but secondaries were not. So a lot of walking, a lot of surveying is what our primary goal has been, and then that kind of you have to be adaptive because all of our bags, and you saw a lot of our equipment up at the FEMA team. I mean, you can't carry a first in bag walking 20 miles, right? It's going to get really tired. So you got to kind of, think outside the box, maybe get a vest, which I have, and put necessary stuff in there. So I kept like over-the-counter medications in my bag. I kept a tourniquet, some first aid stuff, blood pressure cuff, IV. So at least I could start some basic stuff, get an IV into somebody if they were dehydrated, and wait for my other medical equipment to arrive at my location. So it's a lot of adapting and a lot of overcoming a lot of problems.
And when you're activated as a team and it's not like local, right? So if we had something here in Massachusetts, that you'd probably potentially be on a primary search with the fire department or whatever. When you come in on these teams, are you generally coming in behind primary stuff and you're kind of starting like the secondary and tertiary like searches and treatment on people?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, as the federal FEMA USAR teams, we come in to assist the local municipality, right? We're not there to take over. We're there to assist and give you whatever you need. So how the system works is that in order for the FEMA team to be activated, all the local resources have to be completely exhausted. And then the FEMA teams can be requested. So like in Massachusetts, we would have to be utilized as a local asset in order for New York City to come in as a federal asset.
Gotcha.
So New York City just couldn't come in. They have to wait till we were designated a local asset, and then they could come in.
Okay, that makes sense.
Gotcha. How did I don't know if you know the answer to this question. I'm just going to assume you do. But how did the FEMA teams get started? Like when did they identify the need for this?
It was after the earthquake in California in the 1990s, and then I want to say it was the early 90s that the FEMA teams got started. There wasn't 28 at the time. There was maybe 20 and change, and then they kind of upped it. But it was all from the Loma earthquake that occurred, and then it's kind of progressed, right? So We do focus in that medical specialist class a lot on crush, because when you're dealing with a hurricane or more like a building collapse, where people are trapped for days, they have the ability to survive, and you learned about crush in your program, but it's a big thing, and I think when we as rescuers, right? And I'll switch roles for a minute for being like a rescue technician. We want to get in there, we want to breach, break, and shore, right? And then we want to, which takes some time, but then we want to drag the patient out, right?
Right.
Which necessarily isn't the best thing for the patient because they've been trapped for so long. And even from an incident commander's perspective, now that I'm in that role, I have to have that patience, because otherwise, if we just breach, break, shore, and then we pull the patient out, well, they may be talking to you the entire time, but because they're crushed and the rhabdomyolysis and all the muscles that are now affected, it's all local until you release that pressure, and then it goes to central circulation and can cause cardiac arrest, right? So
Right.
we're professionals in the service, and our job is to make sure that we're giving them 110% the chance of surviving the incident, right?
Right. I mean, because even with the treatment, crush syndrome is finicky at best, right? You
Yeah.
could do everything right, and then you release, say that piece of rubble off their waist or legs or whatever, and even though you did everything right, it's still hard to overcome. So it's kind of an odd role to play where when you get, I feel like, and again, like I don't actually have experience doing this, but like I feel like if you get into those situations, you're doing all of these things and you are going to do them all right to give them the best chance, and at the end of the day, you know that that still might not be enough, right? There's just no overcoming some of it.
No, there's not, and I mean, it's very finicky. You put it perfectly, because you're right. You can do everything. And now there's an example that I give. I've done this talk a few times for rounds from my local hospital area, and there was a incident in the 1980s. There was an Amtrak train crash. Multiple people were injured. There was a person that was trapped for hours. She was speaking to the providers at the time. And then back then, there wasn't much information known about crush. And, they did their thing. They extricated. And as soon as they released her from the extrication, she ended up going into cardiac arrest because of crush. I have done one significant crush call. I was actually on duty as a captain. A neighboring department had a person that was trapped in a machine. And I got a phone call from this department asking if I could come up and work with them. I worked alongside of them. I worked with MedFlight. I had a person that was trapped in a press, and the outcome, unfortunately, was not the best. But everybody worked together greatly. Good communication, collaborative effort, and that's the biggest one that I had is working with a crush injury. But
Yeah.
from an incident commander's perspective, it's definitely something that we have to be mindful of, because sitting, and that was the biggest transition for me, going from being a line officer to now being an incident commander outside. It is tough to sit outside of a building fire or a technical rescue incident and not getting your hands into it, right? It is
Right.
very, very tough. But you have to have that mindset. You've got people that are trained, knowledgeable, and let them do their job. And then, in the USAR setting, is treating that crush syndrome.
So have you moved up? Is there a rank structure in the USAR system, in the FEMA system? So have you moved through? Obviously, you're still a medical specialist, but have you moved up in the ranks to where you're more of incident command there, or are you still going out and doing the searches and stuff when you get activated, or is there such a thing as moving up?
There isn't a way. So on the medical side of things, we've got obviously the medical managers are the doctors, right? So you have to be a physician to be a medical manager. That's the position description. But we do have a coordinator for the medical team. I did that for several years, then became fire chief and had to take a kind of a step back, just because I had other responsibilities that were important. However, we had, just like the FEMA system in general, we had multiple other people that were qualified to take that position. Right now, two of the instructors that you met, Foxborough Firefighter and the Norwood Firefighter, both the medical coordinators now, doing a phenomenal job with it. And I I did take a step back on deployments. Just being the chief of department, it's tough for me to go away for a long amount of time,
Right.
because I have responsibilities for 63 personnel of a good sized fire department. But I do stay on as for training. I do stay on to help them get out the door, doing the medical check-in, loading the equipment. Um, and I did take the safety officer course not too long ago for the FEMA system. So I've got the safety background training, I've got the medical specialist background training, and I've also got the water rescue background training. So I was considered before I took the step back, I was considered a water rescue technician to be able to go on the MRP for water.
Nice.
Oh, so you can, I know you said that you can kind of cross train in there. So I was under the impression that as a rescue technician for FEMA, you had to be all disciplines, but you can be specific disciplines.
Yeah. So I have, so for each discipline, there's a task book. They have to meet certain trainings in order to be deployed under that discipline, right? So
Okay, gotcha.
the medical specialist, I meet that. The safety, I just took the safety officer course, just took that not too long ago. And on the water side, you have to have the swift water class. You have to do a yearly swim test, and you have to have boat operations in order to be on the water rescue team. So at one point, I was all current with that. I have done my swim test in a little bit, so I'm non-compliant with that. But as long as you meet those criteria and you're selected, you can deploy as that discipline. Rescue, on the other hand, you need a high angle, you need confined space, trench, vehicle machinery, SCT. So you need all that. I have some of those, but not all of them. But as a paramedic on the FEMA team, you get assigned to a rescue squad. So you get assigned to a rescue boss, and you're part of that team. And your first priority is to make sure members stay healthy after the operational period, to make sure that they have no blisters or their
Right.
hydration. And then so inside of a rescue squad, you get the 5 or 6 rescue technicians. You get the medic. You'll get a hazmat technician on occasion to make sure that things are being meted. You'll get a plans or a technical information person that's documenting all of your data that you're finding. And then that kind of branches out based on the mission, right?
Right.
If we need any additional support people, they'll go with us too. But we all work together as a squad. So it's very similar to a fire department shift, A, B, C, D. We have squads A, B, C, D. And then we work very closely with the squad boss and doing whatever needs to get done.
Is there in those squads A, B, C, D, is it just the luck of the draw for a rotation, or is there this squad is our primary squad and this is the backup to the back? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no. So on a Type 1 deployment with 80 people, you've got 4 squads, A, B, C, D.
Okay.
And then how you deploy or how you're selected to deploy is a bunch of items. Are you green, meaning is all your training hours up? So every year we're required to do 40 hours of training a year within the team. Every year you're required to do 20 hours of what they call cache time, where you go up to the Beverly cache site and you do either something related to discipline or whatever needs to get done for the team as a whole. You have to have a MOBEX, which is a mobilization exercise, every 3 years. You have to have a flyaway exercise every 3 years. And that flyaway means that we work with the military to build pallets, put our equipment on pallets, make sure we understand the loads, the weights, how we load it under the aircraft if we're going to be flying somewhere. And then you have to have a fit test every year. And you have to have basically some first aid, hazmat operations knowledge, testing, and that's all required, right? So if that's all up to date, you are considered green and you're deployable. And then the manager or the squad boss makes the decision of how they're going to deploy. So on the medical side of things, I used to do that, and now Corey and Mike Chisholm, they take care of that aspect. They look at everything. And then a lot of it's based on seniority too, especially in the rescue division where there's so many rescue personnel. They kind of take everything into consideration, and then they look at the needs of the team, and they build their roster off that.
Oh, that's awesome. And all this training is unpaid, right?
Correct. It's all unpaid. It's all on your own time. It's a very big commitment, but it's a rewarding commitment because you're going to go out and help people.
Right. And when you actually deploy, it's slightly different though, right? The FEMA basically covers the cost of you being on overtime or whatever, however it works.
Yeah. So it depends on how it works. So for a firefighter, for a fire service, like North Attleboro has 2 members that are on the FEMA team. I've got a communication specialist, and I've got a technical information specialist. So when they deploy, there's a signed agreement with this department that if available, I allow them to be deployed, and then they're basically on that clock from the time that they leave to the time that they get back, which is reimbursed by the federal government, and that's the compensation for the deployment side of things. But on the flip side, you have to have all of your training and your volunteer time up to date in order to be deployable going forward.
Right. So that's a big commitment. So it's all, I mean, and it was, like I said, it was pretty obvious when we were there. It's all people that love what they're doing, which is awesome. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it is a outstanding group of people. The amount of knowledge and training that you get up there is top notch. 40 hours a year isn't a huge amount. It's definitely doable. I always tell people that are interested in the FEMA team to make sure that they speak to their family first because it is a commitment. And also, if you do deploy, your family is going to be, alone for up to 14 days, by themselves, potentially. So
is that like a max? You guys have a set limit for deployment?
Usually 14 days. It can go a little bit longer, but 14 days is usually the norm. And we do have a support system within our local FEMA team where we have home support, which do provide updates to our families while we're gone, making sure they don't need anything, and then facilitating those measures. I know as a fire chief, when I'm in constant contact with the team, and then the families are updated and notified. If they need anything, they can reach out to me as well.
That's awesome. Damn. Well, that was a lot of good information, man. I obviously knew a little bit of it and had a little bit of exposure to it, but that was a lot of information on like how the teams work, and I think that's pretty cool. And we kind of hit right around 45 minutes. So, is there anything else you want to like chat about or mention or talk about on here? As it relates to FEMA or the fire service in general?
No, I think earlier we would kind of talk about how the USAR system kind of integrates into the fire service, right?
Yeah.
Up in Cambridge, you guys have a technical rescue team. You've got, obviously, underground subways and trains and large buildings. And, down our way, I think the biggest building that I have is 6 stories. I'm not sure what Stoughton has. I think it's maybe very similar.
Yeah, probably.
But it's a matter of time before something, unfortunately, is going to happen, right? And I think all the resources are going to be brought together. We've got the county tech rescue teams, which handle things in our area. But look at New York City. New York City has got a major fire department. They've got a major EMS department. And they do some unbelievable stuff every single day. And in Massachusetts, we're not immune to that. It's something could potentially happen. And having the resources and the expertise is important. The other thing, and we talked about this in the class, was taking back this training you received and practicing, right? Because the medicine side of things, you can easily forget it. It's just like ropes. You don't practice enough, you can lose that skill.
Absolutely.
And I think having a team like the UASI team or the county tech rescue team or the FEMA team, we're not all proficient in every discipline. That's impossible. There's so much knowledge that's in your brain, right? That you have to rely on each other for their expertise. I mean, you may be good in high angle and doing a high anchor point or whatever it may be, or a and then other people are good in confined space. I'm not the tallest person in the world, right? You saw that in when I was teaching the class, right? I'm probably
I wasn't going to say it, Chief.
I'm probably one of the shortest fire chiefs in the state, but I can fit in some confined spaces,
right?
But you need that, right? You need that person to be able to get in there. So,
and I think that's exactly it. Is fire service in general, FEMA teams, whatever it is, you need a little bit of everything to make the teams work. Like you need that person that's just an absolute like nerd when it comes to hose flows and whatever, and then the rest of the people can practice, getting their stretches and lines done. You know what I mean? Like you need the person that can get into confined space or knows all or whatever the case is. So I think that's a hugely important point for the fire service as a whole, much less these specialty teams, is you need a little bit of everything to make it go around. So,
and everybody has to work together. Everybody has to work together and recognize, strengths and weaknesses. And we say it all the time, the ego is at the door, and you can't have that. And a prime example on the county tech rescue teams, I'm a member of the Bristol County team, but rank at that point in time, if I'm assigned to a rigging area, or that's my job, right? I'm not the boss. I'm
right.
I'm the entry person. I mean, my rank at that point doesn't really come into play.
Right. And I think one other thing he said is like it's going to happen, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, especially when we talk about the deployments for these storms. Like these once every 500-year storms are happening once every 5 years, it seems like, right? So it's only a matter of time. Unfortunately, like nobody wants it to be the case, but the reality is that it's only a matter of time before we get hit or somebody else near us gets hit. I mean, look at the amount of flooding they had in Vermont.
Chief, did your teams go up to Vermont for those floods?
Yeah, the FEMA team did get deployed up there. I did not go. They went as a Type 3 up to Vermont. They were up there for a good amount of time. They did a lot of great work. There's a lot of pictures out there. But Vermont actually flooded, oh boy, it was probably 10 years ago, I think. Because I think
it was about 10 years ago. My dad has some property up there. And when he first got up there was some big floods. And then he actually bought a place on a river within the last couple of years. He didn't lose a lot of stuff. Some stuff happened, but his whole town, they had to have swift water rescue teams in. And he told me that there were teams in doing everything. People were trapped in their houses, and he was kind of high and dry, so he was all set. But a lot of damage to the town. I
think we were in Rutland, I think, for that, and we had started out in Connecticut, and they diverted us, and it took us, I want to say, almost 12 hours to get to Vermont because all the roads were impassable. It was a
lot of bridges up there that get wiped right out very fast. Yeah.
So they were up there. They went with a medic, 2 medics and a doc. They did phenomenal work. I actually helped them get out the door. That night I did medical check-in, got them all squared away. And that's been my primary role. Like I said, for me to go someplace for a long time isn't in the best interest of my firefighters right now.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's awesome that you have that loyalty to the guys that work for you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that kind of sums everything up, man. That was awesome, Chief.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time, and I say it. I don't know. I feel like I've said it every episode that we've shot recently, but like selfishly, the best thing about doing this podcast is getting to sit down and talk to people like yourself, and the fact that we've been able to just take a class and be like, hey, Chief, loved what you had to say during the class. Like, would you like to come on and just talk about it? And people have been overwhelmingly responsive to that. And so we really appreciate it. So I just want to say thanks for taking your time out. Obviously, if you guys haven't noticed, Chief here is in his office. If you hear the radios in the background going off, so I was hoping I wanted to hear one go. But
we had to go for the big one come in and be like, well, they had the interview.
Like, I'm getting in the car. I'm gonna go spark this one.
We actually had a call for a fight last night, but it's like 80% EMS and that 20% fire stuff. But
yep, absolutely. So Chief, before we wrap up, I want to put you on the spot real quick. So for the guys listening, guys and girls listening, for the young people or people even later in their career, either a piece of advice or a training drill that's an easy go-to for you.
So I think as chief officers, we want to make sure all of our members are trained, right? And I think the keeping up with your skills, doing those tailboard training evolutions is important. In my department, just like every other department in the country, our call volume is increasing exponentially, and it's becoming tougher each time to do training well on duty, right? Because
Johnny's huge about that in the small to mid-sized departments. It's really tough.
And I'm sure Stoughton's the same thing too, right? So my firefighters on the ambulances are always out at the hospital, right? And that's a tough hurdle, and trying to figure out how to overcome that, right? And obviously we have overtime budgets that are restrictive. So I think those short training evolutions on the tailboard or even at the kitchen table, right? Mm-hmm. When you're everyone's together for a good 10 minutes, have that discussion. And it could be on any topic. It could be anything. But the kitchen table, I think, is probably the best spot. You get the camaraderie, you get to build that trust, and you get to talk about a topic.
That's awesome. Thanks, Chief.
Perfect.
All right, so that wraps it up for the day, guys. Thanks for joining us today. Again, we're here with Chief Chris Coleman. He's the chief of the North Attleboro Fire Department, as well as a medical specialist with Mass Task Force 1, Urban Search and Rescue. It's just like a cool title. Throw that out there. But thanks for joining us, and we will see you at the next one. Chief, again, thanks for your time, and we really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully this is only the first of the interactions that we get to have with you.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chief.
All right.
All right. All right.